Lee Anderson. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Mr Noble, for giving evidence. It's really helpful. I just want to talk a little bit about social media and how that helps and hinders you in your job. Now, and social media is a great platform, but it's also good for fueling protests as well. So I want to know how social media can help you with some of these professional protesters, if you like, and what more can we do to help you with the social media platforms to make sure that you can do your job correctly?
Yeah, and it probably comes back a little bit to the challenge we talked about earlier on about some of the thresholds, and quite appropriately, whenever we look at protest, it's baked into part of a democratic society. So in terms of Articles 9, 10 and 11, from a police point of view, we of course respect those and want to give them appropriate regard. So in terms of social media, on the one hand, it can be a help to us in terms of getting a flavour of public sentiment, what's going to happen and where the issues are. It can maybe give us a line of inquiry to follow in terms of who we might want to engage with, and maybe just try and support and where appropriate shape some of the protest behaviour and activities. On other occasions, there may well be offences committed on social media that clearly we need to look at and consider and progress. Very often, most of the conversations taking place around protest are behind closed doors in social media in various protected groups. And again, the thresholds that we currently work to will not allow us, as a general rule, to be able to penetrate those and find out more information. So it can be of use, but in terms of the most useful information about understanding the impact on the life of a community, some of that most significant information is not taking place in any sort of public forums at all.
Okay, so there's obviously, with these protests are becoming more prevalent in this society with the social media age, I've said. So there's a massive opportunity cost here to the police force, massive, I would say. So how are we increasing the use of things like drones to help police protests and animals, dogs and horses?
No, I think we're open to using new technologies, whether it be digital technologies, the more traditional capabilities and assets that we have as well. I think the challenge we face in terms of policing protest, and again, whenever we look at the various elements of the bill under discussion around lock-ons and some other behaviours, there is a real complexity to these devices that either from a policing point of view will take some significant time to deal with, or indeed from a private company point of view can take significant time and effort to deal with as well. And of course, the challenge is that there's a wide range of people on occasions involved in protests. So this may well be their first time within protest, it may well not. So in terms of offending behaviours, in terms of previous criminal records, some of the elements there which may well be appropriate in terms of bringing someone to account may well not be there. So we're open to using any and all tactics within protest. But as I say, at the minute, probably the common theme around protest is around non-violent direct action, people who are very legally aware, flash protests emerging with limited notice, and some quite complex lock-ons, which individuals know we need to be very thoughtful of how we deconstruct those with regards to the rights and safety at all. So there is no sort of magic bullet to dealing with modern protest. It is a combination, as we've just heard, around legislation, around engagement, around appropriate tactics, and then constantly trying to be innovative around trying to strike the balance between competing rights.
Okay, just one more question, Mr Noble. It's about tunnelling, protesters tunnelling underneath roads and fuel depots. And my big concern is somebody's going to get seriously hurt, whether it be the protester or more importantly, police officers. Can you just explain that to what you have to deal with on not a daily basis, but in general what you have to deal with tunnels and the measures you've got in place to protect your officers?
No, and it's very close to home. We have a current live operation in Staffordshire, which has been running now for some time, involving a number of protesters and incredibly complex. Clearly, we've limited idea of what's going on under the ground in terms of what risks might be there. Are they near utilities? What risk could there be in terms of collapse of tunnels? So it's clearly not a safe environment unless it's done by professional tunnellers. So there's an inherent risk there, as well as then the impact on the legitimate business going about that area. So at this point in time, which probably goes to the core of one of the key issues that police are keen to discuss within the committee, is that the vast majority of that work is done by the landowners, by private companies who are skilled and experienced within this work. So whilst I have some dedicated resources allocated to that at present, if that responsibility was to shift to policing significantly, it would cost me probably in the region of maybe £80,000 a day to resource that. Significant officer resources, which clearly would need to come from elsewhere. So it's not only inherently dangerous, it's costing significant money, and it's undoubtedly impacting, I think, on the genuine, legitimate business interests of various companies. The key for me isn't so much even necessarily an offence around tunnelling, because we may well, and we're keen to develop these conversations, have powers which, broadly speaking, exist to deal with it. The challenge is preventing it in the first place, and then how can we work with industry and landowners about how we can potentially remove individuals more quickly. But we are concerned to have seen it come back on the radar again, and people will be held to account for what they do.